Precious Okafor had always believed in love, as if it were a sacred promise that would protect her no matter what. She grew up in a small village in southeastern Nigeria, daughter of a kind-hearted mother who sold akara by the roadside and a father who farmed yams and cassava to feed the family. From an early age, she learned that life was hard, but that honesty, diligence, and love could carry a person through even the toughest storms. When she met Chaik Nosu, a young man from a neighboring town who was charming, ambitious, and full of confidence, she believed she had found her forever. Chaik courted her patiently, taking walks under the mango trees, sharing stories of his dreams to become wealthy, promising that he would provide a life filled with comfort, laughter, and security. Precious, whose heart had been tendered by the simplicity of her upbringing, fell deeply in love. She envisioned a home filled with warmth, a child who would grow knowing love, and a life that would honor the values her parents had instilled in her. They married in a modest ceremony at the village church, surrounded by family and neighbors. The community celebrated what they believed was a union of love and promise. Precious left behind the security of her parents' modest home and embraced the world she thought she would share with Chaik. At first, life seemed to unfold exactly as she had imagined. Chaik worked tirelessly in his small trading business, and Precious managed the home with care, making sure everything was perfect. She even worked part-time at the local market, selling fruits and vegetables to supplement the household income, believing it was all part of building their dream together. They welcomed their first child, a beautiful daughter they named Amara, and Precious felt her heart overflow with love. She watched Amara take her first steps, heard her first words, and celebrated every small milestone, believing that her family was complete and her sacrifices were worth it. But soon, the cracks began to appear. Chaik, once affectionate and attentive, started coming home late, giving excuses about work, and growing impatient with Precious over minor mistakes. Rumors began to circulate in the village about his dealings with other women, whispers that Precious initially refused to believe. She clung to the man she loved, telling herself that everyone makes mistakes, that love requires forgiveness, and that Chaik would come back to her. One fateful morning, after a long argument over money that Precious had carefully saved for the household, Chaik left, declaring that he was divorcing her. He told her she was too dependent, too simple, and too ordinary for his grand plans. Precious was stunned, left alone with a small child and no financial support. The village murmured about the divorce, some blaming her for being too trusting, others blaming Chaik for his ambition and cruelty. Precious had nothing but her love for Amara and the resilience her mother had taught her. She rented a tiny room in the next village, struggled to buy food and diapers, and walked miles to sell fruits at the market, all while soothing Amara through tears and sleepless nights. Her heart ached not only for her own suffering, but for the look in Amara's eyes when she asked why Daddy no longer came home. Precious cried herself to sleep many nights, questioning why life had been so cruel. Then one day a distant relative called. Precious learned that her late uncle had left her a fortune. She had never known about a small inheritance from a family business he had built, hidden for safekeeping until she came of age. At first, Precious thought it was a dream, too good to be true. She verified the details carefully, ensuring that the inheritance was hers alone. And then, slowly, a plan began to take shape. She would rise, not just for herself, but for Amara. And she would ensure that Chaik would see the consequences of his betrayal. Precious did not rush. She kept her inheritance secret, using the resources to pay off debts, secure her living situation, and educate herself in business management. She started small, investing wisely, learning about entrepreneurship, and carefully building a network of trustworthy allies. Her boutique of traditional fabrics and handcrafted jewelry became popular in the local market, drawing attention not only from villagers but from buyers in nearby towns. Every day she worked, guided by the memory of humiliation and the desire to never feel powerless again. Chaik, meanwhile, lived his life unaware that the woman he had discarded was quietly gaining influence, wealth, and respect. He boasted to friends about how he had left a weak woman behind, never suspecting that Precious was transforming her life from the shadows. Precious kept her focus on Amara, who grew into a joyful, clever child. Understanding the value of patience and resilience from her mother's example, Precious taught her not bitterness or anger, but determination, resourcefulness, and the belief that dignity could never be stolen by anyone. By the end of the second year, her business had expanded to a second location. She began to receive invitations to showcase her designs at city exhibitions and small trade shows. Her reputation as a smart, ambitious, and kind entrepreneur began to spread beyond her village. Chaik, hearing rumors of a successful ex-wife, began to feel a pang of uncertainty. The man who had once dismissed her as powerless now wondered how she could have risen so quickly. But Precious did not act hastily. She knew the right moment for confrontation, for reversal would come naturally. Her focus remained on growth, on securing Amara's future, and on living a life that could never again be undermined by someone else's cruelty. Then came the moment she had long anticipated. A business opportunity arose in the city, allowing her to establish a high-end boutique that showcased Nigerian artisans to international buyers. Precious seized the chance, using her inheritance and careful planning to expand her reach. She became a figure of admiration, a woman who had not only survived betrayal, but flourished beyond expectations. Chaik, still in the village, began to hear news of her rising status. Friends mentioned her boutique's success, her influence in the community, and the financial independence she had gained. The man who had once discarded her was confronted with the reality that he had underestimated her, that the woman he humiliated had become untouchable. Precious received a message from him, eventually a humble, trembling request to meet. He apologized, admitted his mistakes, and even begged for understanding, hoping that perhaps he could regain some influence over her life or at least restore his pride. Precious listened patiently, her heart steady. She had no desire to humiliate him further. She explained that she had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because her peace did not depend on his suffering. Yet, the emotional satisfaction of knowing that he now recognized her power and independence was undeniable. Precious's life had been transformed, but not through vengeance alone. It was through patience, resilience, and unwavering commitment to herself and her child. Amara thrived in the environment her mother had created, learning that strength and dignity come not from others' approval, but from one's own choices. Precious had taken a life that had once been shattered and built something more extraordinary than she could have imagined as a child in her mother's kitchen. Chaik's pleas could not reverse her triumph. She had risen not only as a hidden heiress but as a symbol of perseverance, living testament that betrayal and hardship could be transformed into power, growth, and freedom. The village that had once whispered about her humiliation now celebrated her achievements. People marveled at her courage, her business acumen, and the way she had nurtured her daughter while reclaiming her life. Precious became a mentor for other women, teaching them that setbacks could be opportunities in disguise and that dignity must never be compromised, no matter how crushing the circumstances. Every morning, as she opened her boutique, walked through her thriving community center, or taught Amara the values of perseverance and kindness, Precious remembered the days of heartbreak and betrayal, but those days no longer had power over her. They were reminders of the strength that hardship can forge, the wisdom that suffering can bring, and the beauty that comes from refusing to be defeated. The story of Precious Okafor became legendary not only in her village but in nearby towns, a tale of heartbreak turned into triumph, of humility and patience turning into power, and of love for her child transforming despair into unstoppable drive. People who had once doubted her resilience were forced to acknowledge that a life built on integrity, courage, and vision could rise from the ashes of betrayal stronger and more radiant than ever imagined. Precious had not just survived, she had flourished. And the world now watched as the woman who was once left penniless with a child became an unstoppable force. A hidden heiress, a mother, a mentor, and a beacon of hope and inspiration for millions who might one day face heartbreak but still dream of rising above it. By the time Precious Okafor had stabilized her life, her heart had grown both wiser and stronger. She no longer wept for Cheknowusu, the man who had left her penniless and humiliated. Nor did she long for the comfort she had once associated with his presence. Every struggle, every sleepless night with Amara, every mile walked to sell fruits in the blazing sun, had forged a woman whose strength and intelligence could not be underestimated. Yet, there was a quiet longing that never left her, the longing for acknowledgement, for justice, and for the satisfaction that the world would see that she had not only survived but thrived. Precious's boutique became a hub of culture and commerce, attracting patrons from across the region. She showcased hand-woven fabrics, beadwork, and artisanal jewelry, emphasizing the beauty of Nigerian craftsmanship. Her reputation grew steadily, and with it, the whispers in the villages about the woman who had risen from nothing, the woman who had become a secret heiress. Chaik, oblivious at first, continued his life as though nothing had changed. He remarried quickly, seeking a partner he believed would be easier to control. But even in this new marriage, he could not escape the shadow of his own misdeeds. Rumors reached him of Precious's success, and with them came a slow-burning realization that the woman he had scorned had surpassed him in every imaginable way. Precious, however, had no desire to gloat or humiliate him openly. Her patience, honed by years of struggle, taught her that timing was crucial. She understood that the most powerful form of revenge was not confrontation, but the unstoppable proof of her own achievements. She focused on Amara, nurturing her intellect, teaching her the value of hard work, and instilling in her the importance of self-respect. Amara grew into a bright, confident child. Her mother's resilience reflected in every thoughtful gesture and curious question. One afternoon, while reviewing business contracts for a new expansion of her boutique into the city, Precious received a letter from a prestigious design syndicate interested in showcasing her work internationally. The opportunity was beyond anything she had imagined. She could now take her vision far beyond the borders of her town, elevating both her brand and the lives of the artisans she represented. As she read the proposal, she felt a quiet triumph, knowing that the life she had painstakingly built was now unstoppable. But her joy was tinged with awareness that Chaik was watching from afar, still trying to gauge her progress, still unaware that every decision she made, every opportunity she seized, was a testament to the very independence he had sought to deny her. Months passed, and Precious's boutique expanded successfully into the city. Her network of artisans grew, her reputation soared, and she became a mentor to young women who, like her, had faced betrayal or hardship. She hosted workshops, taught financial literacy, and provided guidance on entrepreneurship, building a legacy far larger than she had ever envisioned. Chaik's arrogance began to crumble as he noticed her growing influence. Former acquaintances whispered about her success, and he realized, with mounting anxiety, that the woman he had discarded was now untouchable. Every report of her accomplishments stung, not because he had been defeated, but because he had underestimated her resilience, intelligence, and the power of her determination. The day came when Chaik attempted to contact Precious directly, sending messages filled with regret and apologies. He claimed that he had been wrong, that he had acted foolishly, and that he wished to reconcile, if only for appearances. Precious read his messages quietly, letting each word settle without emotion. She knew that responding with anger or revenge was unnecessary. Her power lay in the life she had built and the dignity she maintained. Nevertheless, she decided to respond, not to humiliate him further, but to assert her boundaries. She informed him that she had forgiven him, but that forgiveness did not equate to reconciliation. She explained that her life, her accomplishments, and her child's happiness were now her primary concerns, and that his place in her past had been firmly sealed. Chaik's pleas were futile, but they did provide a measure of poetic satisfaction for Precious, who recognized the profound shift in their roles. Where once he held power over her, now she held all the control, not through cruelty, but through achievement and self-respect. The months following this confrontation marked the beginning of a new chapter. Precious's boutique became internationally recognized, her story circulating in local media, inspiring other women to rise above adversity. She invested in her child's education, ensuring that Amara would never feel powerless or humiliated in the way Precious once had. The bond between mother and daughter strengthened daily, built on shared experiences of resilience, perseverance, and love. Chaik, observing from a distance, grew increasingly isolated. His professional ventures faltered, partly due to his arrogance and partly because the network he had relied upon no longer trusted him. His reputation, once untouchable, began to crumble, and for the first time. He understood the consequences of underestimating someone he had wronged. He attempted reconciliation one final time, arriving at her boutique unannounced, hoping to appeal to nostalgia or to gain sympathy. Precious greeted him politely, calm and composed, and offered him a seat. She listened as he attempted to explain himself, but she saw through every excuse. When he finished, she simply said that his time in her life had ended. She wished him no harm, but would not allow him back into her world. Chaik left, humbled and diminished, realizing that the woman he had scorned had become the very definition of independence, power, and grace. Precious's life continued to flourish. She launched a mentorship program for young women entrepreneurs, providing microloans, workshops, and guidance. She traveled across Nigeria, speaking at schools, community centers, and local events about resilience, self-respect, and the transformative power of patience. Amara thrived under her mother's guidance, blossoming into a bright, intelligent, and confident young girl. She understood the importance of hard work, perseverance, and the ability to maintain dignity in the face of betrayal. The community that once whispered about Precious's humiliation now celebrated her as a model of success. A woman who had turned devastation into empowerment and inspired countless others to do the same. Precious often reflected on the past, remembering the pain and the tears. But she no longer felt bitterness. Those experiences had shaped her, teaching her lessons in patience, strategy, and emotional intelligence that she could never have learned otherwise. She recognized that the life she had created, the influence she wielded, and the love she shared with Amara were far more valuable than any fleeting satisfaction from revenge. And yet there were moments when she allowed herself a quiet, private satisfaction in knowing that Chaik had been humbled, that his arrogance had been dismantled not through malice, but through the natural consequences of his choices and the unstoppable force of her own success. Precious became a living legend in her community, a woman whose story was told to inspire courage and perseverance. She demonstrated that even in the darkest moments of despair, when one is left penniless and betrayed, there is the possibility of rising to heights once thought unattainable. Her story reminded all who heard it that dignity, patience, and strategy can transform heartbreak into triumph, and that love for one's child can serve as the ultimate motivation to overcome every obstacle. By the 5th year after her divorce, Precious had expanded her business nationally. She employed dozens of women, giving them a chance to provide for their families and to participate in the vision of a strong, independent female-led enterprise. Amara, now in school, excelled academically, inspired by her mother's example and dedication. Precious's life became a testament to the power of resilience, the importance of education, and the enduring value of integrity and hard work. She celebrated her victories quietly, with humility, knowing that every milestone, every achievement, and every smile on Amara's face was a reward far greater than any fleeting revenge could have offered. Chaik's story, in contrast, served as a cautionary tale. Those who had once admired his confidence now watched his decline, understanding that arrogance and cruelty often sow the seeds of their own downfall. Precious had not only survived humiliation and betrayal, she had created a life that proved that strength, intelligence, and patience are more powerful than wealth or charm alone. And so, Precious Okafor's story became more than a tale of heartbreak, became a story of empowerment, inspiration, and hope. It was shared widely, discussed in communities, and used to teach lessons about resilience, the consequences of betrayal, and the unstoppable power of a determined woman with love for her child and faith in her own abilities. Every day, as she walked through her boutique, greeted employees, and worked on her next business venture, Precious remembered the struggles she had endured and felt gratitude for them. Without those challenges, she would not have discovered the depth of her strength nor the joy of watching her child thrive. And in the quiet moments, she allowed herself to smile at the knowledge that the man who had once dismissed her now understood. Perhaps too late, the price of underestimating a woman determined to rise, to survive, and to claim her rightful place in the world Years had passed since Precious Okafor first felt the sting of betrayal and the crushing weight of abandonment. Her life, once scattered and broken, had been rebuilt with patience, intelligence, and an unwavering love for her daughter, Amara. Now, as she walked through the bustling halls of her flagship boutique in the city, she saw the fruits of her labor reflected in the confident faces of employees and artisans, whose lives she had helped transform. Every bead carefully sewn, every fabric pattern displayed, was a symbol of survival, of triumph over despair, and of a legacy she was crafting not just for herself but for Amara and for countless other young women who might one day face the same heartbreak she had endured. The memories of Chiknosu, the man who had once humiliated her and abandoned her with nothing, had not faded entirely. They existed like distant shadows, reminders of pain overcome and lessons learned. But instead of anger, there was clarity and peace. She understood now that revenge need not be overt or cruel. It could be the quiet satisfaction of living a life so full, accomplished, and honorable that those who sought to harm you recognized their own failures. Precious had become untouchable, not because she wielded power aggressively, but because she had mastered patience, dignity, and strategy. One afternoon, as she finalized a shipment of her boutique's goods for an international exhibition, Precious received a message that made her pause. It was from Chike. His tone was humble, almost desperate as he requested a meeting. He claimed that life had taught him hard lessons, that he recognized his mistakes, and that he wanted to see his daughter and perhaps reconcile in some form, if only for appearances. Precious read the message carefully, noting the shift from arrogance to vulnerability. She felt no immediate rush to respond. Instead, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of what this meeting would represent. The man who had once dismissed her, who had left her penniless and humiliated, was now coming to her, seeking acknowledgement, perhaps even forgiveness. When the day of the meeting arrived, Precious chose a quiet cafe away from prying eyes. She wore a simple, elegant dress, her demeanor calm but authoritative. Chike arrived, nervous and unsettled, his confidence from years past replaced with a humility forced by circumstance. He attempted to explain himself, to justify the choices that had once caused Precious endless pain. But she listened with measured patience, letting each word reach her without disruption, understanding that this confrontation was about closure as much as it was about any remaining power he sought to reclaim. After he finished, Precious spoke clearly, her voice steady and unwavering. She told him that she had forgiven him, not for his sake, but for her own peace. She emphasized that their past would remain a lesson, a chapter closed, that her focus was entirely on her life, her daughter, and the future she was building. Chike left the meeting humbled, realizing that the woman he had scorned had become stronger, wiser, and more accomplished than he could have imagined. The satisfaction Precious felt was profound but quiet. She had proven without malice or cruelty that betrayal could be transformed into strength, and that the best revenge was the life you created for yourself and those you loved. Following this confrontation, Precious doubled down on her commitments. She expanded her boutique to include a training academy for young women in business and crafts, ensuring that others could follow paths of independence and resilience. Her influence spread beyond her city, drawing attention from media outlets and organizations looking to support women's empowerment initiatives. Amara flourished under her mother's guidance, developing confidence, intelligence, and compassion. She excelled in school, participated in community projects, and displayed an early understanding of the importance of perseverance and dignity. Precious took immense pride in her daughter, knowing that the lessons she imparted would guide Amara through life with strength and purpose. In her quiet moments, Precious reflected on the journey from humiliation to empowerment. She remembered the sleepless nights, the empty cupboards, the despair that had seemed insurmountable. Yet those moments had shaped her into a woman capable of achieving greatness, a mother able to protect, guide, and inspire. The pain of the past had not been wasted, had been the crucible in which her resilience and vision were forged. As her boutique's reputation grew, international buyers began requesting collaborations. Precious found herself balancing cultural preservation with modern business practices. She became a figure of respect and admiration, recognized not just for her entrepreneurial success, but for the emotional intelligence, patience, and integrity with which she navigated her journey. Chike's life, in contrast, continued its decline. His attempts at professional ventures faltered, relationships suffered, and the arrogance that had once guided him led to repeated setbacks. While he sought reconciliation, the world saw the contrast between his downfall and Precious's rise. She remained composed, never boasting, simply living the life she had built with unwavering commitment and vision. Over time, Precious decided to hold a community event, inviting artisans, students, and local leaders to celebrate the growth of her boutique and the impact of her mentorship programs. The event was a resounding success, filled with laughter, speeches, and expressions of gratitude from those whose lives had been touched by her dedication. It became a symbol of triumph over adversity, of love channeled into empowerment, and of the enduring strength of a woman who refused to be broken. During the celebration, Amara approached her mother, eyes shining with admiration and love. "Mama," she said, "I want to be like you when I grow up, brave, kind, and strong." Precious hugged her daughter tightly, feeling a fullness of heart that no past humiliation could ever diminish. She realized that the greatest revenge, the most profound success, was not in Chike's humility or regret, but in the life she had built for herself and Amara, in the joy, respect, and empowerment radiating from those they touched every day. Months later, a letter arrived from an international nonprofit organization, inviting Precious to speak at a global women's empowerment conference. She traveled with Amara, sharing their story of survival, resilience, transformation with audiences who were captivated by the authenticity, emotion, and power of their journey. Their story resonated widely, sparking discussions, inspiring other women, and demonstrating the universal truth that betrayal, no matter how devastating, could be transformed into growth, independence, and dignity. By this time, Precious had become a symbol. Her life was no longer defined by the past, but by the present she had carefully built and the future she continued to shape. She had learned that the deepest pain could yield the highest triumph, and that love, when combined with perseverance and intelligence, could overcome even the most crushing forms of betrayal. One quiet evening, as she sat with Amara in their new home, overlooking the city lights, Precious reflected on the woman she had once been and the life she now led. She understood that every tear, every hardship, and every moment of despair had been a necessary step on the path to empowerment. She had taken a life that could have been defined by humiliation and transformed it into a story of resilience, grace, and victory. Cheek's final attempts at contact had long ceased, and while she harbored no malice, Precious knew that the universe had delivered its own justice. Her focus remained on building, teaching, and loving. And she realized that true power lay in the ability to create, nurture, and protect what mattered most. The boutique expanded further, with branches in other cities and partnerships that brought Nigerian artistry to a global audience. Precious continued to mentor, educate, and inspire, her life becoming a testament to the fact that even when abandoned, left with nothing and humiliated, one could rise stronger, smarter, and more respected than anyone could imagine. Amara grew into a thoughtful, compassionate, and ambitious young girl, the living proof of her mother's love, sacrifice, and guidance. Precious's journey had come full circle, from heartbreak and despair to triumph, empowerment, and recognition. She had transformed humiliation into a platform for influence, betrayal into motivation, and loss into legacy. The story of Precious Okafor spread not only in her local community, but across neighboring regions, reaching millions who saw in her journey a reflection of their own struggles, a source of hope, and a model of how dignity, perseverance, and strategic action could reshape a life. Every day, as she walked through her boutique, greeted employees, and worked on her next business venture, Precious remembered the struggles she had endured and felt gratitude for them. Without those challenges, she would not have discovered the depth of her strength, nor the joy of watching her child thrive. and in the quiet moments. When Amara slept peacefully and the city lights flickered outside their home, Precious allowed herself to smile. She had risen not as a mere survivor, but as a symbol of hope, power, and the enduring strength of a woman who refused to be defeated. Every day that followed, Precious continued to build, nurture, and inspire, leaving an indelible mark on her community, her country, and the hearts of millions who would one day hear her story and believe that no betrayal, no humiliation, and no hardship was ever strong enough to break a determined, loving, and courageous heart.